welcome to Tales of Honor Podcast, a podcast dedicated to telling the true stories of the Congressional Medal of Honor. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Tales of Honor Podcast. I'm your host, Christoph Ambrosch, and today's episode is episode 61. And for this month of January, what's remaining of it, and next month, all of February, I'm going to be doing every episode will be a recipient of the Medal of Honor from the Vietnam War era. And tonight's going to start out with a very special one, and it's being brought to you by my good friends over at Sunrise Linens. They're a vintage vibe clothing business that offers quality, handmade clothing right here in the good old US of A. The cold US of A right about now for those of us on the East Coast. Visit their store at etsy.com/shop/Sunrise Linens and be sure to enter the promo code TOH25 for 25% off your order, and be sure to follow them. Give them a follow on Facebook and Instagram because there you'll see new items and any promotion they might be running. Sunrise Linens for nostalgia and wandering. And now, a tale of honor. Roger Donlon was born on the 30th of January, 1934, in Saugerties, New York, as the eighth of 10 children. He went on to attend New York State College of Forestry at Syracuse University for only a year, and shortly after, joined the U.S. Air Force and was admitted into West Point in 1955. He ended up resigning for personal reasons and then re-enlisted in 1958, but this time in the U.S. Army. Roger went to Officer Candidate School and served as a general's aide before joining the Special Forces in August of 1963. In May of 1964, Roger, now a captain, and his team were sent to Vietnam and established an outpost at Nam Dong. This was only about 15 miles away from the Laos border, and early in the morning, on the 6th of July 1964, the outpost was attacked by Viet Cong force the size of 2 battalions. It was Roger's actions on that day that would earn him the Medal of Honor. The citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty while defending a U.S. military installation against a fierce attack by hostile forces. Captain Donlon was serving as the commanding officer of the U.S. Army Special Forces Detachment A-726 at Camp Nam Dong when a reinforced Viet Cong battalion suddenly launched a full-scale pre-dawn attack on the camp. During the violent battle that ensued, lasting 5 hours and resulting in heavy casualties on both sides, Captain Donlon directed the defense operations in the midst of an enemy barrage of mortar shells, falling grenades, and extremely heavy gunfire. Upon the initial onslaught, he swiftly marshaled his forces and ordered the removal of the needed ammunition from a blazing building. He then dashed through a hail of small arms and exploding hand grenades to abort a breach of the main gate. En route to this position, he detected an enemy demolition team of 3 in the proximity of the main gate and quickly annihilated them. Although exposed to the intense grenade attack, he then succeeded in reaching a 60mm mortar position despite sustaining a severe stomach wound as he was within 5 yards of the gun pit. When he discovered that most of the men in this gun pit were also wounded, he completely disregarded his own injury, directed their withdrawal to a location 30 meters away, and again risked his life by remaining behind and covering the movement with the utmost effectiveness. Noticing that his team sergeant was unable to evacuate the gun pit, he crawled toward him, and while dragging the fallen soldier out of the gun pit, an enemy mortar exploded and inflicted a wound in Captain Donlon's left shoulder. Although suffering from multiple wounds, he carried the abandoned 60mm mortar weapon to a new location 30 meters away, where he found 3 wounded defenders. After administering first aid and encouragement to these men, he left the weapon with them, headed toward another position, and retrieved a 57mm recoilless rifle. Then with great courage and coolness under fire, he returned to the abandoned gun pit, evacuated ammunition for the 2 weapons, and while crawling and dragging the urgently needed ammunition, received a 3rd wound on his leg by an enemy hand grenade. Despite his critical physical condition, he again crawled 175 meters to an 81mm mortar position and directed firing operations which protected the seriously threatened east sector of the camp. He then moved to an eastern 60mm mortar position and upon determining that the vicious enemy assault had weakened, crawled back to the gun pit with the 60mm mortar, set it up for defensive operations, and turned it over to 2 defenders with minor wounds. Without hesitation, he left this sheltered position and moved from position to position around the beleaguered perimeter while hurling hand grenades at the enemy and inspiring his men to superhuman effort. As he bravely continued to move around the perimeter, a mortar shell exploded, wounding him in the face and body. As the long-awaited daylight brought defeat to the enemy forces and their retreat back to the jungle, leaving behind 54 of their dead, many weapons, and grenades, Captain Donlon immediately reorganized his defenses and administered first aid to the wounded. His dynamic leadership, fortitude, and valiant efforts inspired not only the young American personnel, but the friendly Vietnamese soldiers, as well as resulted in the successful defense of the camp. Captain Donlon's extraordinary heroism at the risk of his life, above and beyond the call of duty, are in the highest traditions of the U.S. Army and reflect great credit upon himself and the armed forces of his country. Roger received the Medal of Honor from President Johnson in a ceremony at the White House on the 5th of December, 1964, and he was the first Special Forces member to receive the medal, as well as the first person to receive the Medal of Honor in the Vietnam War. All 9 survivors of his team were also present for the ceremony. Roger had requested to return to Vietnam, but it was learned that the Viet Cong had put a bounty on him and his request was denied until 1972. He then returned to Vietnam for his second tour. On the 28th of June, 1965, Roger received the key to the city of Lexington, Kentucky by its mayor, Fred Fugazi. Roger Donlon went on to retire from the Army in 1988 at the rank of colonel and also wrote 2 books about his experiences, Outpost of Freedom and Beyond Nam Dong. And that was A Tale of Honor. Thank you so much for listening to Tales of Honor podcast. And if you like this podcast, please be sure to leave a nice review, a good rating, and tell a friend. You can see more information on Facebook, Instagram, and at talesofhonorpodcast.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them over to talesofhonorpodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, I'm Christoph Ambrose. Thanks for listening.